As we continue on topic, remembering the legacy of Commander Fidel Castro, let's welcome political scientist and sociologist Atilio Boron. Welcome once more to From the South, Atilio.
Hello, good afternoon. Well, a pleasure to be with you in your program.
Thank you for being with us. Atilio, today we remember Commander Fidel Castro not just as a historical figure, but as a continuing symbol of resistance and sovereignty. How would you summarize the core, enduring legacy of Fidel Castro within Cuba itself? What is the essence of Fidel's ideals that persist today?
Well, I would say that Fidel was an extraordinary political leader. He was the most important, I would say, the most important political figure in the second half of the 20th century, without discussion. Perhaps you can say Kennedy, some other guys, but Fidel, who had a profound influence in the shaping of modern world, because he was a person with extraordinary capacity to know things before they happen. He like a person who his sight was always beyond what is normal for any one of us. He was able to identify problems long before any other people do that, and also to go in deep to understand the situations of the world. He was a person of extraordinary capacity to organize things. And I have for me the conviction that the day of his passing away, of his death, was not by chance. Fidel wanted to make sure that he would die on November 25th, less for a special date for him, but more in order to make people remember that the same day, November 25 of 1956, started the Granma, the trip from Mexico to Cuba to start the revolutionary process. You know very well that Fidel said he didn't want at all, and he was quite radical in this, to have any square, any monument, any things bearing his name. And of course, nobody in Cuba dared to challenge the very profound desire of Fidel just to be remembered by his works, by his deeds, of all that he did, not only for Cuba. Fidel was a leader of an extraordinary international projection. Racism and in Africa wouldn't have been unable to disappear without the help of Fidel. The Algerian Revolution in Algeria was also to a grand extent helped by Fidel. And so with many processes of change in all the world. But Fidel didn't want to have no avenue, no street, no building, nothing. But there is one who did not follow Fidel's exigency, and this happened in Moscow, in which there is a square, very nice square, with a monument of Fidel. The president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, agreed to have a statue and a square named Fidel Castro Square in Moscow. It's the only one that we know, but there are not any other square of public buildings, of monuments devoted to this, which was one of the greatest leaders of the second half of the 20th century. Let me tell you just one thing. I'm sorry if I am going very fast in this, but in 1992, in the first summit of the Earth, which took place in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, Fidel pronounced a unique speech. Okay, the uniqueness is not because the, the fact that it was a short speech of no more than 6 minutes and so on, but because he foresaw questions that nobody else, none of the chief of state which were there, right? Felipe González, Felipe González, Alberto Fujimori, Carlos Menem, Ricardo Lagos from Latin America. There were, of course, people coming from all over the world. It was a United Nations Summit of the Earth, right? And Fidel pronounced a fantastic speech, 6 minutes, no more than that, whose first sentence said more or less this: there is a species which is suffering the deterioration of the conditions which made possible the apparition of this species on the earth. And that species is the human species. You know, saying that, anticipating in 1992 question that nobody pay attention. It is interesting, for instance, if you are public, go and explore the reactions of the people who were there. For instance, the president of Brazil was Fernando Collor de Mello, who was a sort of playboy. And he, Collor de Mello, Felipe González, Carlos Menem, Alberto Fujimori, smile like patronizing Fidel, say, well, this old man always saying all these catastrophic ideas about revolution, capitalism, exploitation, colonialism, so on. They didn't believe what Fidel was saying. But after few years, what Fidel said in that conference became common sense of the large part of human mankind, except the leaders of many, many nations, okay, which are committed to serve the interests of the big oil companies and so on, or the fossil industry, which is deteriorating to some point at the level of irreversibility the conditions of the of the earth. Fidel saw this 20 years before all the rest. This is something which struck me very, very strongly, because it gave a concrete example of the different nature of Fidel as a leader. And so I'm sorry I'm taking too much time, but this led me to the conclusion that Fidel decided in which moment he was going to die. And I am sure that he wanted to make sure that on November 25th, not only was he going to be remembered, but also many people would say this is the day in which all the revolutionary process in Cuba started, with the grandma leaving Mexico and toward the island of Cuba. This is my view of this extraordinary man, which, as I mentioned, you left an indelible mark in all the second half of the 20th century and also to the beginning of this century. Let me add this: the defeat of the ALCA project of the U.S., the project to create a common free trade area in all the Americas, which took place in Mar del Plata in the year November 2005, had a great strategist of that battle. And that strategist was Fidel. And there was a general in the field who was following the directions of Fidel in a very creative manner, and that was Hugo Chavez. Fidel could not be in that meeting in Mar del Plata in November 2005, but Chavez was there. And both of them, Fidel from Cuba and Chavez on the ground in Mar del Plata, were the great creators of that enormous defeat suffered by the U.S. in 2005, bearing for many years the process of integration, Latin American integration, subordination, economic subordination to the United States. We owe that to the foresight of Fidel and the strong capacity of debate and discussion of Hugo Chavez in that major event in Mar del Plata.
Thank you very much, Atilio, for your inputs as always, hearing from the South. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more, but thank you.